on the pigs, I've mentioned that my husband Tom has really wanted to get a couple of pigs, and we've been talking about this for a number of years, but we don't have the infrastructure, and we have gone to a couple different people who are growing pigs and looked at what they're doing to try to think through that process. Tom grew a pig some years ago, so he really wants to do that again. We like to eat pork, but looking at someone like April Thatcher last week shared some excellent insights about her experience raising and selling pigs. It's crucial that you think it through and be realistic. You know, we really want to do this, but when we look at the changes that we have to make for having an infrastructure for raising pigs, we looked at what the fencing is going to cost and how much space we need per pig. We were just going to do 2 pigs. I mean, they're herd animals. They need to be at least 2. Looking at the watering system and the hog feeder and the shelters for the storms and the heat, and also looking at how we're going to get them to the butcher, and then looking at the marketing of the meat. And you got to think that through. And the other thing, I'm really not sure I can even eat a little piggy because they are really cute. I mean, I could name them bacon, but I'm still not sure. I mean, I like eating it, but I at this point I think I'm going to stick with getting my pork from Tony Carey, who will be a guest speaker with us in a couple of weeks. So this is an excellent resource that I found on evaluating your resources, and the website is there, and you can go to that website and download this for more reading. And this just kind of sticks to what I've been giving you an overview here of just really looking at not only the financial, and Craig has talked about this quite a bit, you really need to look at the holistic aspects, and that means you're looking at every bit of it, not just saying, oh, this would be fun to have pigs, or oh, this would be fun to have chickens. Think it through. And you know, one of the we had goats for years, and we had goats for 12 years, just withers, and once we got through the process with our goats, and they're really just pets. We had them as pooping machines. They're great for the compost, great for the garden. But I was not the one that was cleaning out the goat pen. My husband was, and so we don't have goats anymore. But they were great pets. They were great for the kids that came to visit the farm. But as we assessed the process and the cost of that, we really shifted through that. This is a spreadsheet example from the Organic Farmer's Business Handbook, and it's on the companion CD that comes with that book, and you can download these templates. And I have started working on this for our crop enterprise budget, and my goal this winter, before I get buried in everything that comes with the farm, is to go through specific crops and do a crop enterprise budget for everything, get it set up, and then work through this trying to get it on a spreadsheet. And later when we look at record keeping, I'll show you some simple basic things that we've done over the last few years that have not been using spreadsheets, just because I haven't been that savvy of a spreadsheet user. But this is a crop of broccoli at our farm. But we have these great templates available to us to help us work through some crop enterprise budgets. So if you're doing cropping, you need to do that. And I think you might, the handbook is mainly for crops, but you might be able to utilize some of those for livestock as well. You should have a handout of a financial assessment for this, an example for Green Tree Naturals garlic gross profit analysis that I did for 1 2 by 70 foot row, and it will be on the Moodle site that you can look at. And when we went through and did that, and this is why we need to do this for every crop that we have, we really were able to determine that yes, this is a good crop for us. And people are always saying, well, if it's such a good crop, why don't you do more? Well, we don't do more because we don't have the infrastructure we have 2 sheds and they're completely full of garlic when the season is done. So it's just looking at the whole picture, going through that. So I encourage you to look at that Moodle site and review that garlic gross profit analysis that we've done. Look at that, I'm right on time. So I have a poll question here for you, and if we have any questions, we might have time for those. But let's do the poll, and then we'll see where we go from there. So that was fast and furious, but it just kind of gives you some insights, and I think what Craig and Barbara have to say will take you to the next level of this conversation.
So here's your poll. So go ahead and click on the responses that are most appropriate to you. So you may have more than one that's accurate. So we have about half of our participants have voted so far. It's 70%. 80%. Let's give it one more second before we close the poll and display the results. Okay, 100% of people have voted. I'm closing the polls and share the results. So there we have it, 71% considering a new enterprise, 71% completed a SWOT analysis, and 43% have done a gross profit analysis for a new or existing enterprise. So
That's great. So we have a few minutes for questions, if there are any. If there aren't, we'll move on. We'll move on to Craig and let him give you his overview of gross profit analysis. Do we have any questions?
Not yet. So if some come up, we can catch them in the next question and answer period.
Okay. Well, I'll pass this over to Craig and let him take the next step.
Thanks, Diane. And yes, welcome everyone. Appreciate everybody coming in tonight. And we had the nice to see the sun as well in our area as well. So as Diane was going ahead with looking at enterprises, now we're going to we've talked about gross profit before. I talked about it some, and April talked about it as well. But I just wanted to make sure that everybody had a clear understanding what the gross profit analysis is and what information goes into that, and then go through a couple more examples for people to make sure they know where the numbers come from and what the numbers mean. And so the gross profits analysis, as we talked about before, is really an instrument to look at which enterprises contributes the most towards covering overhead costs, and you can help you evaluate new enterprises, your existing enterprises, and it also is a tool for doing some risk assessment as well. The gross profit is fairly simple. It's just really your gross income minus your variable cost, and that equals your gross profit. And one of the things you keep in mind when you're doing this, it doesn't take into account any fixed cost. And it's going to show you a visual, maybe help you in the equation. Sometimes visuals are a little more helpful than equations, so just kind of a quick visual about what gross profit looks like. Again, in Enterprise A, the overall income is at $20,000. The expenses the variable expenses are $11,000, and then so that gives you a gross profit of $9,000. The one thing is, again, the gross profit works so that you are not allocating any of the fixed expenses that you have into that enterprise. All gross profit analysis is designed to do is to show you which enterprises, based on the income that's solely related to enterprise and the expenses that are solely related to that enterprise, and how much money that enterprise will contribute back to covering overhead expenses. And just to talk a little bit about what are some of the fixed expenses. When you're looking at, these are expenses really that are, no matter what enterprise you're doing, they are there. They're already set, like your land payment. Doesn't matter which enterprise you're doing, your land payment is going to occur no matter what. If you have existing equipment that you have already purchased, those payments for that equipment are already set. And labor it can be the same way. If your labor, you hire somebody and they're available to allocate to whichever enterprise you decide, then it's that is also a fixed expense. So any expense that you've already committed to or are making is a fixed expense. A couple things, as Diane was talking about, a couple examples, and that was, for example, the chickens. And if you're adding a new enterprise, then there are some things that if you have to buy new equipment, if you have to buy fencing or housing, or for example, the chicken, or build housing or buy supplies to build that housing, or need like they say, the shelter for the chickens, the fencing for the chickens, or any other equipment that you may need to process them if you're going to do some of that yourself. All those would be considered variable expenses, because that's a new, you haven't made those expenses yet. You are so when you do the analysis of adding that new enterprise, you want to include those in that gross profit analysis. One of the things when you do that, though, is that you're not, for example, if you have to spend $1,000 on fencing. Well, you can't. That one expense, $1,000. You got to prorate that over a period of years, because that fence will last 10 or 15 years or whatever. What's the expected life expectancy for that fencing or that housing? So you would divide that expense over a period of years. So if you got so some things, so it can be kind of confusing about what's a variable and what's a fixed expense. But really, it comes down to the simple explanation of that is, if you've already expended the money, or essentially you or committed that money to spend, for example, as a land or a mortgage payment, then it's a fixed expense. The variable expense, again, it'll change with the level of production. The more chickens that you're producing, the more feed you have to buy, and again, it hasn't happened as of yet. The expense has not been made. And this is just a quick example of fixed versus variable costs for gross profit analysis. Now, if you bought this piece of equipment, this trailer, for example, 2 years ago, and maybe you're still making payments on that trailer, that is, since it's already been committed, you've made the payments, you're committed to buying that, and you're making payments, that is considered a fixed cost. So that would not go into the gross profit analysis for example, my enterprise of using goats, hauling goats for using vegetation work. I have to have a trailer to do that with. Once I've committed to that expense and made that commitment, then that becomes a fixed expense and no longer a variable expense. Last week when April was talking about showing a gross profits analysis, she used it kind of in a unique way, and that was comparing various market segments of where her dollars came from. So she used it to look at how much money was coming from her CSA, how much money she was getting from restaurants and groceries. So she used it as a tool to evaluate potential market avenues. It also can be, it's mainly, and that's a good way of using it. That's another unique way of using gross profit analysis, just evaluating how much money is coming from various market sources. Another way, and probably more the traditional way it's been used, is to compare specific products. This example from previous years, I got the figures from Diane, and then some other figures from another lady. So we compared looking at garlic and spinach as two enterprises that you're committed to evaluating and seeing how they compare to each other. And you get down to the bottom line, and you look at, okay, gross profit analysis. Gross profit for garlic is $506.19. And look at spinach. Oh, it's only $65.06. Well, garlic's got to be, it's so much higher. We got to really focus on the garlic. Well, one of the challenges with the first thing that you got to do in a gross profits analysis is that you have to really get what's the gross profit per unit. What unit are you looking at when you first look at? When you look at in this example, you don't know what that's $506.19 gross profit, but you don't know what the units are. There's no units tied to that yet. So you've got to essentially look at ways how to compare apples to apples and not oranges. You got to be on